recording. David, would you like
Welcome everybody. Sorry for the delay. Technology as we know it, but we're here, and thank you very much. We're excited to be presenting this new Economy Summit webinar series as soon as we get it sorted from a technological point of view. You organized?
Yep.
Perfect.
Go for it.
My name is David Jaffe. I'm a chartered accountant, been running an accounting practice for many, many years, and now we are sharing all this information with you, and we're very excited to be doing this presentation alongside Laurent, who's joined with me in Successful Business Advisors to throw a new avenue at all the business people out there, and we welcome you to today's event. Laurent.
Thank you, David. Good morning, everyone, and for those who are joining from US, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining this morning. My name is Laurent Mas, co-founder of Successful Business Advisor, and definitely we got this morning what exactly happened in business. It's the unexpected technical issue and so on, but it's exactly what you should do in business. It's really adapt, get flexible, and no matter what, drive and keep resilience. So I'm very grateful to have you here this morning. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for all the speakers on the summit with us. And I'm grateful that our first speaker, Chloé, is very close to my heart. And she's going to start with one topic that is really important in entrepreneurship. And I started with this topic as well on resilience and the adaptability. So I'm going to let Chloé go for it. Thank you, Chloé.
Thanks, Laurent. I'm really privileged. I feel privileged to be asked to be first in this webinar series of an amazing lineup of speakers. So thank you, Laurent and David, for this opportunity. This is a little bit different than how I expected to deliver today, but I think it is really apt, as Laurent said, that unexpected things happen in business, in life, just like the COVID lockdown that we've all been experienced and touched by in some way. So I think that, the show must go on. I'm here because I want to support everyone that's on this call to really develop their leadership and adapt more to the environment that we are all finding ourselves in, which is rapidly changing. So I'm going to continue on this morning as close as possible to how I was going to originally deliver. So please bear with me if we need to make some adjustments or modifications along the way. So today I would really love some interaction. I'd love to hear from you. I believe Laurent has a chat box open with the technical issues. I'm not sure if he can see that, so he can confirm as we move along. But let's give it a go. So I would love to know right now where you're tuning in from. Are you in Australia? If so, what city? Are you international? If you are, tell me what country. Maybe there's a couple of you from the US. Laurent was saying that there may be some people from America, which is great. So have a go. Type in the chat box or the question and answer box to see if that is working for you. So it's great to be here, as I said. I really want you to make the most out of this webinar. So if you have a pen or paper handy, oh, hey, Pei, you're from Singapore. Awesome. Nice to have you here. So if you have a pen or paper, or you don't, grab one, have it handy. And you might also want to take notes on your device. I often just take notes on my device because I lose pieces of paper. And that way, if you hear something that really resonates with you, something you think you can take moving forward and integrate into your work or personal life, then you're going to have that there. And the more you take notes, the more likely you are to take action from that. And today is all about learning something that's going to help you to change something in your life. So we really want you to take action in some way. So keep writing things down, keep putting things in your device so that you're ready to take action after this webinar. So everyone's life's changed in some way, shape or form since the start of this COVID lockdown. For those of you that can access the chat box, if you can tell me something that's changed in your life since lockdown, I would love to know. Maybe you've been stockpiling some essential items like toilet paper. There was a run on toilet paper in Australia, as a lot of you would know. Or maybe you're working from home and this is a new thing for you. So if you can, type in the chat box and get involved, and I'd love to hear from you. So interestingly, with this webinar having technical issues and with COVID having, I guess, technical issues that are affecting all of our lives, we may be finding ourselves in a little bit of a stressful situation. I know I was feeling a bit of stress at 11 a.m. this morning when we were due to go live. And just like in this COVID crisis, I had to find a way, and with the support of the team I have around me, including Laurent and David and Tim here who's supporting me at this end, we had to find a workaround to go, okay, well, what we ideally wanted to happen didn't work, but what's the next best alternative and how can we find a workaround? And we did this by Laurent using the slideshow and him controlling that slideshow rather than me. So we found a way because we couldn't screen share. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about today is finding a way around when your option A, your ideal scenario, your vision for what you want to happen in your project just doesn't happen. There has to be other ways, workarounds that you can find spontaneously and be ready for that. If you've got a prepared option B, that's even better. So for those of you that haven't met me before, or maybe you didn't see the flyer about this webinar, you may not know me. And so for a quick, this is Pay again. So currently in Singapore, there are measures for people to work from home as much as possible. Yes. Yeah, I know a few people in Singapore pay. Actually, I know English Channel swimmers trying to swim the Channel this year, and they're not allowed to swim in any pools or the ocean. So it is definitely pretty serious lockdown happening in Singapore, and I hope you're doing okay through all that. So I was just about to introduce myself. Some of you may not know my name. It's Chloë McCardel, and something you may not know about me. Yes, Pay, I think that Laurent will be trying to share the slides. He's doing his best, and I'm sure he's just finding a workaround for that. So I'm going to keep going. So about 16 years ago when I finished school, I made a decision that I wanted to be the best in the world at something. So despite not being a top achiever at school or even being ranked nationally in any activity, I just made this decision. I did have a bit of a background in swimming where I had swum competitively at state level, doing quite well. And what I did when I finished school, for about 3 years, I experimented with a few different sports. And I fell in love with marathon swimming. So that was 16 years ago. Now fast forward to today, and I have the world record for the longest non-stop ocean swim at 124 kilometers, and which took 42 hours. And I'm one of 5 people in history and the only Australian to have swum a non-stop triple crossing of the English Channel. So that was 102 kilometers, taking 36 hours and 12 minutes. In total, I've swum the English Channel 31 times. I've also coached 150 people to swim the English Channel as relays and solos. And I'm even trying to escape Australia right now to get to England next month. Now, you may or may not be aware, but Australia currently has a travel ban not letting Aussies leave the country. So at this point in time, if I want to leave Australia, I'd have to apply for an exemption. That's the next step that I'll be looking at in the next couple of weeks, because my aim is to swim the English Channel up to 4 more times this season. So wish me luck trying to get out of the country and trying to swim to France, because at the moment, England has a 14-day quarantine period, and so does France. So I don't really want to go to England, spend 14 days in quarantine, and then spend 14 days in quarantine every time I go to France and swim there either. So during my marathon swimming journey and coaching other people to their successes in the English Channel, I've discovered a few things. I've discovered that I could not have become a world record holder and the best in the world in my area without amazing coaches. Without their belief in me, their guidance, their accountability, their emotional support, their ability to give me independent feedback and expert advice, then I would have lived my life wondering, what if? I've also discovered that many people don't have a coach to support them in their career goals to get the results they are dreaming of. I've come to the realization that being the best in the world at something is an active choice that I made, not just once, but every day along my journey to my success. So it hasn't been God-given talent that's propelled me to success. It's been a choice, an active choice made every day. Now, you may have heard of the myth around leadership. And if you have heard this myth before, just pop in the chat box whether you've heard it before, so a yes or a no. And that's the myth that someone is born a leader, that you're either born a leader or not. So type in the chat box if you've heard that one before. Now, this myth has been debunked several times, and one of the people that's debunked this myth is the very famous and esteemed American scholar, author, and organizational consultant, Warren Bennis. And he said, the most dangerous leadership myth is that leaders are born, that there is a genetic factor to leadership. In fact, the opposite is true. Leaders are made rather than born. Leadership, therefore, is a skill which can be learnt and strengthened. And so, from all of this journey and my learnings, I've become inspired and passionate about dedicating my life to supporting people like yourself to achieve your personal and professional goals. I'm really passionate about coaching and leadership, which is why I integrate research-based emotional intelligence leadership into my one-on-one and group coaching, and I also facilitate that in corporate organizations. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today, using emotional intelligence to leverage your effective leadership. Awesome. Laurent has the slides back up.
Nice. Thank you.
That adaptability.
Please let me know when you want to. Please let me know when you want to move the slides, Chloe.
Okay, yeah. So we're just, if you just slowly move through, we're about 3 slides ahead now. And while Laurent's doing that, I'm just going to let you know about a really special gift that I've organised for one person today only. So if you stay until the end of the webinar, and you can answer the question that I'm going to throw you at the very end correctly, and if you're the first person to do that, I am going to personally gift you an emotional intelligence leadership self-assessment plus a 1-hour coaching session to assist you to develop your emotional intelligence leadership skills. So these things together are worth $500. So as I said, take some notes with your pen and paper or your device, get interactive, learn as much as possible, and then stay tuned to the end, and you may even win this leadership assessment and debrief. Okay, so let's get going. And Laurent, let's skip to the next slide, please. So we're experiencing some challenges in COVID right now. I don't know about you, but I've had a bit of COVID cabin fever, which I define as being locked down and having a bit of fever, like you want to get out of the house, but you're really not supposed to. So if you've had COVID cabin fever, just pop in the chat box, COVID cabin fever, or pop in, get me out of here. So some of the challenges that in the workplace that people may be feeling are stress, struggling with employee engagement, either as you as the employee or maybe you in a leadership position. This is something that is affecting your direct reports. And also leadership styles. So we're seeing a few different leadership styles by politicians, and they make good examples of leadership because they're very public figures and they're very important leaders in society, and they are people that we look up to for good leadership. So we're all being stress tested right now. And none of us, well, if you have been trained in this area, please let me know. But I'm going to assume, unless you let me know differently, none of us have been trained to deal with the situation that we currently find ourselves in. So what we bring to our situation, whether it's our personal life or our professional life, what we bring are our emotions, our values, and our past experience. And the first step to being a great leader is being able to manage yourself, your own emotional state. So that's the first really essential step to having great emotional intelligence, is being able to manage your own emotional state. So, Laurent, if you could pop to the next slide. I just want to go into a little bit more detail about these three topics that I've just introduced. So stress is something that I believe a lot of people are feeling at the moment about our situations. So you may be stressed yourself as a leader. You may be managing people who are stressed. And how we deal with this COVID situation and the associated stress, or in other situations, how we deal with trauma, depends on our values, our emotional states, and our past experiences. So let me illustrate this. And I'm sorry if the screen's a bit blurry, but you hopefully can make out some of the words on the screen in front of you in the limbic system. The most important things are the prefrontal cortex, which is top right, and thanks for reassurance, Kay, and the amygdala, which is in the bottom right, which I'm going to refer to as we go along. So just keep those two regions in mind. So I'm going to give you an example about being triggered into an emotional state. So suppose you have an old sporting injury in your knee. So this doesn't normally bother you because, you know, you've got an office-based job and 3 small children at home, and usually you don't get much time to exercise. But let's just say, you know, during lockdown, you've saved a few hours a day in commuting and you thought you'd spend some of that time exercising. So you've decided to get a bit more fit, you know, relieve some of that COVID cabin fever we've been talking about, and then you start running. Now this running where you're bearing a lot of your weight as you run, so unlike swimming where you're quite supported in the water, when you're running, you're actually dragging your weight with you with every step. So under the pressure of this running that you've taken up, your old injury that you have is stress tested and becomes a problem again. So our historical emotional wounds or traumas can surface when stressed. And some of us have been stress tested by COVID-19. And we need to go back to the basics because some of these emotional wounds have resurfaced. So if you find that you're getting triggered in your home or workplace in situations that you wouldn't have usually been triggered, so triggered into an emotional state. So for example, you're short-tempered, or you're more anxious than normal, or you're cutting off colleagues short, or you've got less patience for your children when they're getting a bit tired, maybe near bedtime at home. So if you're a little bit more on edge than normal, then what may be happening is a situation that we're finding in is causing you more stress, and then other emotional wounds from the past are getting triggered. So one of the first things to really be aware of in these situations is to take a moment and reflect. And in that reflection, have some self-awareness about the state that you're in, what's triggering it, and what may be lying underneath all of that from the past, something historical, that may be causing you to be extra triggered into this situation. So self-awareness is really the most important first step here. Now, I mentioned before we're going to talk about some of the things on the screen. So the bottom left, you might see the word hippocampus. And it is this section of the brain that makes associations to old wounds and old stories. Now, what I mean by old stories is that we create a narrative. So a story in this situation is like a narrative. So a narrative is a way of thinking about things that we've interpreted ourselves, a way of making meaning out of something. Because words are just letters or they're just print until we make meaning from them. So we make meaning from our own wounds, old wounds, from the past, and the things that we tell ourselves, our self-talk about those wounds. And we make associations through our senses, so our 5 senses, and we react out of them until the point where we take charge and then we make sense of them. So we make an interpretation that makes sense of these old wounds. So just to quickly sum up that area, it has a little bit of neuroscience mixed in there. It's basically saying that just be aware you may get stressed, extra stressed at the moment because of the COVID situation, which may be triggering up some other issues in the past that haven't been resolved. And to be really self-aware of the talk that's coming into your head and the stories, which means the way that we create sense and meaning about what's going on in our life, our current stresses and emotional wounds from the past that may be interplaying with our current stress. So really self-awareness is the key there. And then we can make better sense of what's going on and more rational decisions and maybe act in a more rational manner rather than a very emotional manner. So one of the other challenges that a lot of organizations are experiencing and leaders are experiencing is employee engagement. So as well as managing your own stress levels, assuming that you're a leader in your organization, is that you need to consider the stress and engagement levels of those you are managing, so your direct reports. So it's been more than 2 months since lockdown started now, and the dust is starting to settle at work. So people are now finding their new normal routine for lockdown. The pace is slowing down, and adrenaline levels, which were high at the start of lockdown, are now decreasing. In reality, this new kind of normal is starting to settle in. And employees around Australia, and possibly Singapore too, maybe Pei can let us know, employees are reflecting on what has changed and what has been lost. And they've begun questioning when things might return to normal, and if there will ever be a normal like there was in the past, because maybe we'll be transitioning to a new version of normal. So it's really not surprising that after this rapid period of workplace change, in addition to disruptions to other aspects of our daily life, like our personal lives, many employees are now starting to report feeling stressed. They're feeling tired, they're feeling frustrated, disconnected, and demotivated. And this has left many leaders wondering, what can I do to build morale and maintain employee engagement during this crisis? And now understanding, measuring, boosting, and maintaining engagement continue to be a primary concern for organizations right now. So I'm going to go through some tips to help you if you're a leader to increase employee engagement, or if you're an employee yourself, you can also use these tips to increase your engagement in the workplace. Now, the last main challenge a lot of workplaces are facing at the moment is what sort of leadership style should we as leaders be displaying? How do we best support our teams? So Dr. Martin Newman, who has a PhD in psychological science, so he's a clinical and corporate psychologist specializing in emotional intelligence. He's conducted research and discovered findings that really challenge the conventional wisdom that good leaders use authority to dominate their followers, so their direct reports. So instead of using this military-inspired command and control style of authoritarian leadership, which is telling people what to do and enforcing by compliance, and instead of another type of leadership, which you may be aware of, where the belief is that effective leaders should use charisma, so charismatic personalities to manipulate people into conformity, is also another style which is going out of fashion at the moment. So Dr. Martin is leading a new picture of leadership, and that's leadership skills that has emerged through this emotional intelligence framework that he has discovered that better accounts for leadership performance. And great leaders, he has found, they have the skills to manage their emotions well. Remember, we talked about self-management a little bit earlier. And before you can manage others well with emotional intelligence, you really have to be able to manage your own emotions first. So he found that great leaders have the skills to manage their emotions well and influence the emotions of other people towards positive outcomes. So to simplify this, what he's saying is that leaders must become masters of mood and lead organizations that excite, energize, and enthuse their employees and customers. Okay, so we're going to jump to the next slide now. And I'm going to just really switch to a different gear right now and just give you a little bit more about background about my marathon swimming journey in case you're curious. So remember, I was finishing school and I wanted to achieve something great. I wanted to be the best in the world at something. So I was 19 years old, tried a few sports, and then I fell in love with marathon swimming. And I realized that the pinnacle of marathon swimming in the world was swimming the English Channel. Now, if you've heard about the English Channel before, just pop in the chat box that you've heard about the English Channel. It's pretty famous, but I don't like to assume that everyone's heard about it. It's so famous that when the first person swam it, they got a ticket tape parade down in London. So that means basically everyone in the city, well not everyone, most people, came out to cheer the first person, which was Captain Matthew Webb, to swim the English Channel. So it's been seen as really the mecca of international marathon swimming. Okay, so Troy's heard of it, Pay's heard of it, yep. So it's really where the best swimmers since the 1800s in marathon swimming have gone to test themselves. So I set my eyes on it. Now, most people, and there's not many people that want to swim the English Channel, but most people that want to swim the English Channel, they just think about swimming it once, and that's their life goal dream, and they're really happy with that. And that is a great achievement, and I've coached over 30 solo swimmers to swim a one-way swim, and they've been delighted with that. But my dreams, my aspirations were higher, and I was dreaming of a double, non-stop English Channel crossing. So it's 68 kilometres in the very cold 16 Celsius, so that's about 60 Fahrenheit, for those that know that metric. Really cold water, it's often very rough. And I set this huge goal for myself because I wanted to be the best in the world. Now, it was a really tough journey, and I had to keep a really optimistic view from the outset. I imagined myself successfully swimming 2 laps non-stop of the English Channel. So I used a technique called visualization, which has come from sports psychology, and I learned as a teenager when I did competitive swimming. And that is to really imagine in your mind, when you have some quiet time and there's nothing distracting you, imagine yourself in the future. It's like having a future belonging connection to your goal. And so I imagined myself swimming the English Channel for hours and hours on end. I thought it would take about 20 hours. And I would imagine that once or twice a week, to the point where I just believed it was my future. I was so connected to it that I didn't wonder if I was going to swim the channel. It was just a matter of when and how. So I had this goal of swimming a double crossing of the English Channel. I went over there. I've been training for 2 years specifically for that, although I've been swimming for about 6 or 8 years in total by that point at a very strong squad level. I went over there, and when it was my day in September 2009, my day to swim my swim, I started walking down pebbles on the English shoreline, and these pebbles are really big. I don't know if you guys have been to England or anyone who's from England, but those pebbles are so huge and they're very unsteady. So I was just wobbling down this pebbly English beachside, and then I just pushed myself gently into the water, and you can see a picture of the water there. It's a bit brownish. It's not the most beautiful water in the world. I pushed myself in, and then I started swimming. And I swam and I swam and I swam and I swam, and eventually 12 hours later, after a very long day, I got out, and it was about 1 p.m. So it started quite early in the morning and finished at 1 p.m. I was on French land. I had to really struggle to get to the top of these big, large boulders on French land. They were underneath a lighthouse, so very rugged, very inhospitable area to try and climb out of, and sharp rocks. And I stood there and I looked back towards England, and I couldn't see England because you can't see more than 30 kilometres. So all I just saw was blue, and I realised I had to swim all the way back. So I was only halfway to my goal at that point, and I just swam the English Channel. I turned around, and to cut a very long story short, because you don't want to be here all day hearing about my swimming of the English Channel, at about 23 hours in, I had huge 2-meter waves because a storm was starting to roll in. It was pitch black at night. I think it was now, I don't know, about 11 p.m. at night. And the boat captain, because I have a boat that escorts me across the channel, the boat captain lost me in the middle of the swim. And I was screaming out, I was about, I don't know, 30 or 50 meters behind the boat. I was screaming out, "Don't leave me behind," because I was terrified as I was this tiny little swimmer in the middle of the English Channel that they were going to lose me forever and that was going to be the end of it. That was my fate. So they eventually turned around, found me, and I just lost complete trust in my captain, the boat captain at that point. I thought, if this man can manage to lose me in the English Channel, then I don't think the next 8 hours, which was the prediction for how long it would take me to finish my double crossing, I didn't think that he was capable of doing that without potentially losing me. And because I lost trust in him, my physical condition deteriorated very quickly. So I had mild hypothermia at that point because the water is so cold, as we talked about earlier, but my condition deteriorated very quickly. So that was it. That was the end of my dreams from a double crossing of the English Channel at that point. I faced a lot of criticism from other marathon swimmers that, you know, I shouldn't have set such a huge goal of wanting to do a double crossing when, you know, I'd never swum an English Channel single crossing before. Who was I, this young upstart from Australia, to think that she could come all the way to England and basically show up everyone? Because there are many people that fail in their crossing, their single crossings to swim the English Channel. So to have someone from Australia come over and say, "Hey, I'm not just going to swim it once, I'm going to swim it twice non-stop." And I tried to do it in a humble but confident way. It definitely ruffled some feathers, especially wing swimmers. So I faced a lot of criticism, and I tried not to get too involved in all that because these people didn't know me. They didn't know how much preparation I'd put in, and I didn't think that their criticism was valid. So I really externalized all that negative feedback that I was getting from external sources and decided that it wasn't anything personal about me because these people didn't know me. So their criticism really wasn't based on any real evidence. Needless to say, not reaching that goal was very difficult for me. It was a very difficult time from the following month, but I did decide, whilst I was still in England after that unsuccessful crossing, within 24 hours, I decided I was going to go back because I believed that I was actually more than capable of swimming that double crossing on that day if I'd had a different boat captain. So while I was in England, I met another boat captain who'd taken Susie Moroney across the English Channel. So Susie Moroney, has anyone heard of Susie? Just pop in the chat box yes if you've heard of Susie. So when she was 17 years of age, she became the first Australian and the only person before me, because I eventually did succeed doing this, she was the only Australian who had ever swum a double crossing of the English Channel. So I realised that if I was going to swim my double crossing, I needed a better boat captain. And I just figured out, well, if Susie uses this boat captain called Reg, I was going to use this boat captain called Reg. So I learned something really valuable in that exercise. I didn't reach my goal, but I learned that, you know, if I need to change things, if I want to get a more successful result, I've got to look at what other successful people have been doing. And I realised that he's really the best in the business and probably should have been the person that I booked with the first time around. So I went back the next year, 12 months later. I got in with this new boat captain called Reg. New, when I say new, he's not that new. He'd been doing it for like 40 years. So I got back in. I swam to France, turned around, and then I swam all the way back to England. I finished my double crossing in 21 hours and 48 minutes. That's non-stop swimming. And this time is not uncommon for your average channel swimmer to swim a single crossing in. So I did 2 laps in the time that it takes some people to do 1 lap. So for those of you that aren't that familiar with the English Channel, there are many unexpected challenges which can present during a channel swim, like extreme pain from torture. The waves can pound at you for hours on end. The monotony is often never ending of swimming continuously arm stroke after arm stroke for several, if not dozens of hours non-stop. Sometimes people vomit continuously, so they can't, any liquid or solid they take in, they can't actually keep down and they just keep vomiting it up. And also there's the mental side of things of isolation, feeling that you are disconnected from your boat captain, your crew, and generally the world. So it can be a very difficult mental challenge as well. And then on top of that, you have hypothermia, which is a condition where your core temperature drops, and if it drops enough and it doesn't reverse, then you die from hypothermia. So it's a very real and present danger in English Channel swimming. It kind of feels like the cold water is eating away at your bones. Well, that's the way I've described it, and some other people think that it's similar who swim the channel. But really what's happening is that your internal organs, the core temperature is dropping so low that they're actually slowly dying. So English Channel swimming really is an extreme sport. If you're tossing up between swimming the channel and climbing Everest, I'd probably suggest climbing Everest because it's just a little bit more of a gentler, easier exercise. So one of the things that I learned through my own marathon swimming of swimming the English Channel so many times and coaching so many swimmers to swim the channel is that it's really challenging as a swimmer to keep swimming to France when you don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know what conditions you're going to face. You don't know if your captain is taking the right direction because they take this bizarre S shape across the channel. They don't go in a straight line. So a lot of swimmers, like, they're doubting their pilot. Is their pilot taking them in the right direction? Why are they going side on to France rather than straight to France? So it's a very big challenge as a swimmer to just stay in the water all the way to France. And they don't have much visibility, these swimmers, because they're very low in the water. They don't have their own compass. They don't have a map. And they're really kind of reliant on their crew to make decisions for them. They have to pass control and just trust that their coach who's on the boat with them, trust that their pilot are going to do the right thing by them and that they're making the right decisions. So these swimmers don't have much visibility and they're relying on other people. And I've found that they cannot successfully cross the English Channel without this escort boat, well, because it's required by the Coast Guards, the French Coast Guards and the English Coast Guards. But more than that, it's the knowledge of this boat pilot navigating for them, making those choices. And the analogy that I like to use here, this boat captain is kind of like the technical know-how specialists within business, or those that are good at strategic planning. So they're really good at that side of things. But equally, if not more important, the swimmer will not be successful unless they really trust that their boat captain and their coach who is there is making the right decision for them. So that trust element is absolutely critical. So in this learning, I've realized one of the most important elements to my own and my swimmers' success in marathon swimming is trust. Trusting in the coach and the boat pilot. So the more uncertain swimmers are about what's going on in their swim, for example, lack of visibility when it's night and they've been swimming for hours or they can't see, lack of visibility because there's waves, they can't see over the next crest, they can't see more than 5 or 10 minutes, or they don't know how many hours it's going to take until they finish their swim. It's just an open-ended book and they don't know. And the more stress that they're under, the physical stress, the emotional stress, the mental stress, then the more that these swimmers rely on the leadership and the guidance and the grounding that they get, not only from the captain, but really more from their coach, who's there as their emotional support and guidance. So the way I like to bring this back to the business context is that if people trust you as their leader, then they will do literally anything that you tell them to do to get towards their goal. If they really believe that you have their best interests at heart, that you're there protecting them, giving them the best opportunity, then like a marathon swimmer, they will work through and swim through immense, seemingly impossible pain and challenges if you can inspire them and they trust in the decisions that you're making. But if they lose that trust, like I lost that trust with my first pilot in the English Channel, then they will start doubting you or themselves. And look, either way in that situation, the game is really over. So if you want to succeed in the harsh and inhospitable conditions of the English Channel, and I'm probably guessing no one here wants to swim the English Channel, and that's okay, but the analogy still stands. So let's just say you hypothetically wanted to do that, or you want to get through this COVID economic crisis, which is probably why you're still here, and you want to really show strong leadership skills. To do this, it needs to be built. Your leadership has to be built on a solid foundation of trust. So leaders with high emotional intelligence, they create and they nurture trusting relationships. So your people will not be inspired to follow you if they don't trust you as a person. So if you send them mixed messages, like, for example, Scott Morrison was accused of doing early on in lockdown, or if you don't feel, or if your employees don't really feel connected to your humanity, they don't see you as an individual that has an emotional bandwidth, then they're not going to feel connected and trust you as a leader, and they're going to be second guessing you along the way. So emotions are going to determine whether or not people will trust you in a crisis, whether they will work well for you, and whether they as customers will buy from you, whether they will employ you or enter into business with you. Now, I mentioned earlier Dr. Martin Newman. So he's done some groundbreaking research and he's found some interesting insights that I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to just summarize some of the things that he said. Powerful, effective leadership is the byproduct of emotions associated with certain behaviors. Now, the right emotions are invaluable because they create strong relationships between organizations and their customers and employees, creating a competitive advantage. Now, particular emotions and their associated behaviors can solve problems, create products, deliver superior service, and dramatically boost personal and professional performance. Now, that all sounds pretty awesome. Now, if you would like to better do this within your organization, then please just pop yes in the box. So there is a stack of data showing that businesses with highly emotionally intelligent leaders have higher revenues. So with high emotional intelligence, and just pop back one slide, please, Laurent. With high emotional intelligence, you won't just survive in this crisis, you will outperform your peers. So I haven't really defined what emotional intelligence is. And there are a few definitions out there, but it's the capability of individuals to recognize their own emotions and those of others, to discern between different feelings and label them appropriately, to use emotional information to guide thinking and behavior, and manage and/or adjust emotions to adapt to environments or achieve one's goals. The concept first appeared in 1964, but gained popularity in the 1995 book Emotional Intelligence, written by author and science journalist Daniel Goleman. So if you've heard of that book or heard of Daniel Goleman, just pop yes in the chat box. So more recently, Dr. Martin Newman, yep, so Pay's heard of him or the book, fabulous, has authored a best-selling book called Emotional Capitalists. It's a great book. I read it and I even carry it around and reference it during my day when I'm looking for tips and inspiration. So if you haven't got it yet, I encourage you to seek that out. So you can contact me if you want to know where to get that. The book deciphers and shares tips to develop emotional skills for effective leadership. So the groundbreaking research by Dr. Newman discovered 10 essential components of emotional intelligence that are empirically linked to the specific behaviors of successful leaders. Now on the screen now, you can see these 10 competencies: self-control, straightforwardness, adaptability, which we've been practicing on today's webinar, self-actualization, optimism, which I've circled because that's what I'm going to go into a bit more detail about, self-knowing, self-confidence, empathy, relationship skills, and self-reliance. So there are 10, but because of the time limit, and we're already at 12, I don't want to keep you too long, we're only going to briefly look at optimism. So if you want, write them down, or you could take a photo and then you can keep a record of that. So what I'd suggest you do is that you keep those 10 competencies in mind, because you can create ways during your day to really reference them, remind yourself that you're trying to integrate them each day, and maybe even make a little game of it and find out new ways that you can tap into these things or to grow and develop those skills. Now, as I said, I'm going to go into a little bit about optimism, because that's one of the 10 competencies. So there's 8 ways to really get the most out of optimism. and they are to really tune into your self-awareness. So we've talked a little bit earlier about acknowledging and managing your emotional state, which is absolutely imperative for leadership. First of all, you've got to manage your own state before you can manage your relationships well with others. What you may not already know is that we make decisions emotionally first. So information comes through our brain first. Through the limbic system, we use our emotions to try and decipher what's going on in our world. And once we've made an emotional decision about what's going on, we then rationalize it with logic. So most of us think that we make rational decisions and then our emotions just kind of pop up out of that, but actually the reverse is true. So becoming aware of your emotional responses each day at home and work is a great way to increase your awareness about them. All right, number 2, big picture and vision. I mentioned earlier about myself visualizing my successful double crossing of the English Channel, which I did achieve on my second attempt. So it's really good if you can create and keep connected with your big picture and vision for where you are going. And keep this in mind through the challenges, the setbacks, and things that pop up along the way that seem like roadblocks. You want to keep a really strong connection to your future successful self. So number 3 is look for benefits. Look for the benefit in every situation, especially when you experience setbacks. No matter what happens, be committed to finding answers and possess a confident expectation of success. See all experiences as a positive opportunity for growth and self-mastery. And seek the valuable lesson. So seek it in every problem or difficulty. So you might be thinking about, well, what can I learn? What's a silver lining from whatever is happening to me right now? So rather than focusing all energy on the, for example, deal that you may have just lost in business, what an optimist would do is they would think about what to do differently the next time around. They would acknowledge to themselves that there are no mistakes, only learnings. Number 5, keep focused on the task. Focus on the task to be accomplished rather than on negative emotions such as disappointment or fear. See the possibilities within the task. And I guess try and figure out roundabout ways to achieve what you want if you are not succeeding in your ideal direction. Like this morning, we found a workaround to get the webinar going when at first our ideal way of running the webinar wasn't possible. Number 6, self-belief around your normal state. So this really links into the self-talk you have and the way that you create meaning about your experiences. So view success and happiness as your normal state and see negative events as temporary glitches on the path to your inevitable progress. Number 7, decatastrophize. This one is a mouthful, this word. Decatastrophize and ask yourself. That means to, instead of catastrophizing, do the opposite. So someone who is catastrophizing is thinking about the worst possible situation, for example, making out as if something could potentially die or the whole world is ending, something like that. So you want to do the opposite. So rather than think in the worst case possible scenario, what you could do is ask yourself this question. And so I would write this down because it's a great one to keep handy. What's the worst thing that could happen? And can I live with it? So I'll say that one more time, just in case you're trying to grab that down. What's the worst thing that could happen? And can I live with it? So you're going to then focus on everything you can do to minimize the fallout, which is what we did this morning. So we didn't cancel the webinar. We had some technical issues. We started late. We figured out a roundabout way to still run the webinar. We minimized the fallout. Depersonalize and redefine the situations in terms of their external causes. So in our situation, we're having technical issues. Running Zoom webinars has well more technical challenges than just running a normal Zoom meeting. And, we just had some technical glitches. So we're not going to, spend all day worrying about it or, getting overly critical. We'll just spend some time reviewing later what's happened and we'll just decatastrophize and depersonalize it. Now, the last one is number 8, dispute negative self-talk. So we all have that little voice in our head, which can sometimes be a bit overactive, like a monkey, and it can often have very negative thoughts and things to say, and they can be quite pervasive, which means they kind of take over. So if you have these thoughts, really identify and tell yourself, look, that's not a rational thing to say, and replace it. So if you're going to tell your mind you don't want to think something, you need to replace it with something else, something more reasonable or something which is more affirming. So you may be someone who has daily affirmations. So you could put an affirmation in and replace that negative thought, which you decided wasn't supporting you. So there has been some criticism about optimism. There are some people that think, oh, it's all rose-colored glasses, or, you know, it's just one way of seeing the world. It's not very realistic. So rather than thinking of optimists as lucky people that just have better lives or get better outcomes or earn more money, because it is known that optimists earn more money than other people who are not optimists, rather think in a way that optimists have a particular way of seeing reality. So optimistic people have had their own share of setbacks and disappointments. I mean, you can probably say that I've had some disappointments in my marathon swimming journey and yet remained really optimistic. So these people have had disappointments like the rest of us, but somehow they have found inside themselves the emotional skill to go back and back again in the disappointment and setback they are experiencing. Now, Jack Welch was an American business executive, chemical engineer and writer. He was the chairman and CEO of General Electric between 1981 and 2001. That is 20 years, which is amazing. So when he retired from GE, he received a severance payment of $417 million, the largest payment in business history in this sort of area. So if you think Jack knows a thing or two about leadership, CEO of General Electric for 20 years, if you think he knows about leadership, type yes in the box now. Okay, so this is what Jack said about leadership. He said, your job as a leader is to fight the gravitational pull of negativism. Now, that doesn't mean that you sugarcoat the challenges your team faces. It doesn't mean you get out of the office and in everyone's skin. But what it means is really caring about what they are doing and how they are faring as you take the hill together. So I think it's fair to say that Jack, he was a bit of an optimist, and that worked very well for GE and for him personally. So let's jump to the next slide. Thanks, Laurent. Just the next slide, please. So you may remember that my initial double crossing was unsuccessful. When I did succeed doing that the next year, I decided I wanted to be the first Australian to swim a triple crossing of the English Channel. That's 3 laps non-stop. First time I tried it was in 2011 and I failed. I tried it again in 2012, then I failed. And then finally in 2015, and you'll see a picture of this on the screen right now, 2015, after 3 attempts in a 5-year period, I finally successfully became the first Aussie and the 5th person in history to swim that non-stop triple crossing. It took me 36 hours and 12 minutes. And I swam 130,000 swim strokes to complete that triple crossing. Now, I would not have been able to do this without believing in a successful future, despite failing that triple crossing on 2 occasions over many years. I kept an optimistic outview that my future was successful, that I was capable, that I had the right team around me, and that I knew that it was going to be my future. I just figured that I had to learn more. I needed to learn how to do it because whatever I was doing wasn't working for me. So I knew I was on a learning trajectory and that I had to listen to the feedback I was getting from the world, from the environment about what I was not doing correctly. And I knew I had to change things to eventually get to my successful result. And so in 2015, I did that triple crossing. And now some of you are probably quietly thinking, that lady is nuts. What is she doing? And why is she still swimming the English Channel? She's already done 3 laps. Why does she want to do more? And I hear this joke quite often. And people say to me, why are you swimming the English Channel? You know there's a plane, there's a train, and there's even a ferry. And what I say to those people is, Well, I just like to take the scenic route a lot. Okay, so we're coming to the end of the presentation. I want to do a very quick review because you may remember I was saying earlier that I really want you to take notes. I want you to integrate the learnings so that you can then take positive action and increase your own leadership skills. So let's do some very quick revision. Can anyone remember some of the 10 essential emotional competencies of effective leadership? There are 10. I'm going to watch the chat box. So Laurent, make sure it's open. Let's see who can get some of the 10. Optimism, self-control, awesome, Pay. Anyone else? Adaptability, really good. Yep. That's 3. You're doing very well. Okay, I'll give you some of the others. Self-knowing, relationship skills, self-reliance. Oh, yep, empathy. Great. I was going to say that next. Self-control, straightforwardness, self-actualization. So I'm not sure if we've covered all 10 yet between us, but that is a very quick recap of the 10 competencies. We only covered 1 today because of the limited time. So optimistic leaders possess the following skills. There were 8 skills that optimistic leaders possess. Can you remember some of the 8? I'll give you the first one. The first one was self-awareness. All right, I'm not seeing much happening in the chat box, so I'm going to give you these for free. So, oh, don't quite recall, no problems. So the first one was self-awareness, big picture and vision, look for the benefits, seek the valuable lesson, keep focused on the task, self-belief around your normal state, decatastrophize, and dispute negative talk. Now, if you struggle to get them down, just send an email in the chat, ask to connect with me in the chat box, and Laurent will connect with me, and I'm happy to email you all the slides so you can have all that information. Okay, so we're coming up near the end. If we can pop to the next slide, Laurent, that'd be fabulous. Now, I did promise if you stayed all the way to the end and answered this question and you were the first person to get it correct, that, oh, actually, no, we've got 2 more slides too. All right, sorry, this is a bonus slide. So I'm running a program starting from mid-July. It's an 8-week group coaching program to boost your confidence and find your inner voice to accelerate you towards your personal and professional goals. It's starting mid-July. It's for women only. Sorry, men, but you can't get into this one. And if you mention this webinar when you're speaking to me after this call, then I'm happy to offer you a 25% off for being on this webinar and staying all the way to the end. Thank you for that, Laurent. And the next slide. So the next slide just covers if you do want one-on-one personalized coaching for your emotional intelligence leadership development, or for coaching generally towards your goals, you can also reach out to me directly. My email's there, and Laurent can probably or someone else could pop that email in the chat box, and then it'll be available for the participants. Thank you very much. And popping to the last slide now is the very end, where you can win that free emotional intelligence leadership self-assessment and 1-hour debrief with myself personally. Pop in the chat box the answer and be the first correct person to pop it in the chat box. The question is, how long did it take me to swim a triple crossing of the English Channel in 2015? Now we want you to get the hours and the minutes correct, because there may be a few people who know the hours. So if you know the hours and the minutes, that would be ideal. If you can't remember, then maybe we'll have to pass on this opportunity to win this item. Okay, Pay knows how many hours. Can you remember the minutes, Pay? Nope. Okay, I reckon Pay's done an amazing job this whole webinar, and she definitely deserves to win this. So I'm going to declare Pay the winner. Well done, Pay. I'm giving you a round of applause all the way from Australia. We have your email. I will personally connect with you after this webinar. Thank you for being so interactive. I've loved having you on board this webinar. Okay, so just to finish off, remember that optimists have a particular way of seeing reality. You know, they've had their own share of setbacks and disappointments, but somehow they found inside themselves the emotional skill to go back and back again in the face of disappointment and setback. So you can choose to be an optimist. Ignore people that say that you're born either an optimist or a pessimist or a realist. Being an optimist is a choice and it's a skill you can develop, and it's essential for effective leadership. So thank you very much for your time today and for staying all the way to the end. It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you very much to Dave and Laurent for hosting this call and for giving me the absolute privilege of being first cab off the rank, as we say in Australia. It's the first one to be able to be on this webinar as an expert. So all the very best for all of you out there listening to this webinar as you move forward in your leadership journey. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Chloe. Thank you so much for everyone this morning to attending. Sincere apologize about the technical issue, but you've been really amazing, Chloe, and managed it. We went through it. So I really love the optimism leadership skill. Adaptability, it's really good. So thank you so much all for joining this morning, and thank you, Chloe. Neville?
Thank you, Chloe. Yes, it was a very enlightening presentation, and I was exhausted thinking about all that swimming, all those strokes. I'm tired now. I need to have a rest.
So we'll send to all the attendees Chloe detail for you to contact her, and all people that join as well registered, and the recording as well.
Yes, very good.
Thank you so much, and wishing you all a wonderful day.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.